I just can't believe it. This can't possibly be true. Now, we've been hearing all sorts of rumors about Kathleen Kennedy being on the outs with Disney, but then we hear exactly the opposite, where things have never been better for Kathleen Kennedy. One thing I think we could all agree on is she's garbage for Star Wars. She may be good for other reasons, tactical reasons, or money-making reasons, or logistical reasons, or leadership reasons. I don't know, but what I can say is she's terrible for Star Wars. And I think if you agree, I hope you've clicked that like button. There's also a red subscribe button down below. Please do click it. It's the only way you'll find my videos. YouTube does not recommend them, and I would greatly appreciate it. Look, if we want to talk about Kathleen Kennedy as like a coworker, I guess I can't really speak to that because I don't work with her. She seems awful to me, but maybe not. Maybe it's just, you know, the way the internet paints her. It's entirely possible. One thing I can say about her leadership skills, though, is that they are terrible. The fact that you would let somebody like Gina Carano get fired and find out through social media is either a gross oversight by you or done purposely. Either of the two are just terrible as a leader. But there's been a recent shakeup at Disney, and there's a lot going on here. You see this from the hashtag show. What Disney shakeup means for Kevin Feige, Star Wars, and Kathleen Kennedy. Let's be honest, Kathleen Kennedy's tenure as president of Lucasfilm hasn't been the most stable. From the decision to let Rian Johnson helm The Last Jedi to the directorial and marketing debacles of Solo: A Star Wars Story, irate fans are still calling for the Disney exec's head on a platter. Granted, the ship seems to have righted itself with the non-theatrical productions, the award-winning Mandalorian, and the most popular streaming series in history. The Clone Wars final season was astounding, fair. Likewise, The Bad Batch, meh. Plus a veritable cornucopia of live action still to come to Disney Plus, like the Book of Boba Fett. But the recent shakeups at Disney HQ had some questioning whether or not Kennedy would remain at the helm of Star Wars. Of course, Marvel had Kevin Feige at the center of that discussion. Now, Kevin Feige has said he's not interested in taking anything over. Bob Iger, now that's what I would say too, to negotiate a gigantic salary. Bob Iger handing the key to Magic Kingdom to new CEO Bob Chapek has brought about, quote, radical changes to Disney. According to a report from Variety, Disney has completely restructured its business model. Now there are three divisions: studios, general entertainment, and sports. The task of herding proverbial cats that are money-making brands, i.e. Star Wars, Marvel, will fall to Alan Bergman. Chief among his duties is managing execs like Kathleen Kennedy and Kevin Feige. The question of what role Feige will play with Star Wars could loom heavily over Bergman if the criticism of Kathleen Kennedy continues. Kathleen Kennedy Feige, after all, is apparently seen as the most essential executive at Disney right now, and why not? Marvel Studios has an unabashed success. In many ways, asking Feige to settle things down at Lucasfilm makes a lot of sense. Those opposed to Kathleen Kennedy would certainly welcome the change. It seems, though, that decision rests with Feige, for better or worse. He's not interested in taking Star Wars over from his colleagues. Well, could you imagine the blowback of Disney firing a strong, independent woman who don't need no man, and then replacing her with literally the worst thing on the planet, a straight white male? It just wouldn't happen. Rumors swirled that Feige might take control of Lucasfilm when the studio announced that they would, in fact, produce a new Star Wars film. He's denied such rumors, noting his involvement with Star Wars rests solely with producing that film. And as a fan, Disney insiders likewise maintain that Feige is fully committed to the Marvel duties and has no ambition to lead Lucasfilm. Well, this report just broke out of Pirates and Princesses. Kathleen Kennedy's tenure as head of Lucasfilm may be coming to a close. Quietly, things have been shifting at Lucasfilm and the Walt Disney Company. One may say the mood is quite different in the house that George Lucas built. It started with the dramatic cleanup of social media behavior by Lucasfilm employees. Then, despite the Herculean efforts it would take to get Indiana Jones 5 into production, everything was thrown at making a movie a reality. The head of Lucasfilm, Kathleen Kennedy, began scheduling appearances at the production of the movie, along with her husband, Frank Marshall, in a way that isn't often seen for executive producers. Next, the bad news for Star Wars, and Disney Plus began subtly leaking out of Disney, almost certainly a soft, coordinated manner. Interesting. Kathleen is in the final year of her contract with the Walt Disney Company for presiding over the studio largely is all about Star Wars. Her tenure has been a bumpy one. While her immediate box office success of The Force Awakens and Rogue One was monumental, things quickly devolved after that from a financial position. Whereas the other Disney properties grew in popularity and economic importance, Star Wars began to diminish with the release of The Last Jedi, and it was a steady drop until The Mandalorian. If you've been following Star Wars, you've probably read articles like those above, Behind the Doors with Kathleen Kennedy's Lucasfilm. You know that there are people that defend Kathleen Kennedy and those who despise how she's performed. But the tenuous relationship he's had with Disney was ultimately frayed when Favreau demonstrated just how popular Star Wars can be with The Mandalorian. That certainly was embarrassing for Kathleen. And yet, it was somehow squandered with the mishandling of Gina Carano. Whatever your opinion is of the actress, the way in which she was terminated from the company was a public relations nightmare. 100% agree. Of these execs, of these heads, Feige is seen as the most essential. Oh, we hit that already. In the above quote from Variety article, Brent Lang and Matt Donnelly, you'll notice that the insiders have spoken with are purposely throwing Kathleen Kennedy as well as Pixar leaders under the proverbial bus. Kevin Feige, head of Marvel, is the real essential executive, they say. And while they heap praise on other Disney executives throughout their expose, Kennedy is essentially forgotten other than a throwaway mention. Her only reason for being included in the story was to say that Feige could have her job, except for he doesn't want it. This lines up with what we've heard in the past few years. We reported for the past year that Disney would likely be amicable to some ways to part with Miss Kennedy, but what's telling is that Variety is now putting that information out into the public sphere, their position as a trade publication, and make no mistake, Disney uses outlets like Variety to tip the industry on where they'd like to go. By the way, this is via piratesandprincesses.net. Definitely check out their website. If you've listened to the second quarter earnings, they've been in places where Disney Plus has launched longer, the brand new geographical locations. Given that Disney Plus is still a very new service, it's kind of fun to listen to Disney refer to, quote, mature markets. The biggest mature market, obviously, being the United States. They're talking about growth. Now, we saw last week in the financial call that growth was slower than expected. But that said, you still have a massive subscriber base, well over 100 million people paying for and completing monthly subscriptions for Disney Plus. Now, consider that recent Star Wars material other than The Mandalorian, Star Wars Resistance, was a flop. Star Wars Galaxy Adventures was mocked vociferously. Sorry. The High Republic is perhaps the worst received content since the certain holiday special. The Bad Batch has launched to lackluster excitement. Is there any buzz? No. If you actually look at it, a lot of these shows really, you could say at best have been okay to the niche that was already interested in them, but they haven't really garnered any crossover or any growth. I haven't felt interested at all or enticed at all to open up Disney Plus or find other ways to watch Disney Plus to watch these shows, and I know I'm not alone. There's one thing that will get people like Bob Chapek to make big decisions quickly is declining stock prices. There's no better way to drive down Disney stock at the moment than to fail on delivering subscriber increasing Disney Plus content. Does this mean that Kathleen Kennedy is most assuredly exiting the role she's held before Disney purchased Lucasfilm? Not necessarily. We could see Kennedy getting a one-year limited extension. It's also possible she could be bumped into a legacy role, but financially, it no longer seems feasible for Disney Plus to keep her on board. And at least her endeavor continues to be a pattern of incompetency. We're hearing from sources and public reports that Indiana Jones 5 is again running behind schedule. Whereas the movie was supposed to begin filming this spring, we're now finding out it's still filling casting holes. The movie is now reportedly scheduled to film with Harrison Ford not until August at the earliest. By the way, this film shouldn't even exist, and may actually film after Guardians of the Galaxy 3 begins. Considering one injury to Ford could end the entire movie for good, the effort and money being thrown at the film is quite the gamble. And Indiana Jones 5 can't make it to theaters by its latest release date of July 29, 2022. You could potentially be looking at a release date where Harrison Ford is 81 years old. It's interesting. I mean, I have nothing against Harrison Ford at all. I mean, make your money, dude. But It's obviously Indiana Jones is a mess. They've delayed it to the point where it's the verge of impossibility. And that's sort of been Kathleen's ride at Lucasfilm, for better or worse. While she's managed to stay afloat this long, don't be surprised if, quote, the Force's female executive is finally on her way out. And perhaps a Hail Mary for Indiana Jones 5 film that actually turns out well and everyone involved could just be the way for her to ride off into the sunset. Well, the fact, the most compelling part of this story is simply that her contract is up. And there has been a litany of undeniable failures. Sure, you can look at The Force Awakens and the money it made, but, I mean, it was going to make money no matter what. And the film was fine. The Last Jedi still made a lot of money, but was really an inflection point for the Star Wars fandom and started to drive people away from the franchise. Then you have Solo, a Star Wars story, literally losing money. I don't know how often Disney loses money on films, but I guarantee it's not very frequent. Although Mulan probably lost money, although we'll never really know because they like to hide these numbers inside the Disney Plus subscription numbers, and box office numbers will be difficult to tell. But I would argue that interest in Star Wars probably isn't at an all-time low. That's probably not fair to say, but it's definitely in a huge valley since peaking when Disney acquired the franchise. I think, one day it still would be cool to go to Galaxy's Edge when it's finished and has actual cool stuff to see. Maybe, but I'm not really that interested in it. It looks pretty bare bones to me. Looks like a lot of cash grab stuff. Yeah, another funny robot. Great, great, great. I don't think that you can ignore all the directorial bungling that has happened under Kathleen Kennedy. The bungling of the Gina Carano scenario, the bungling of several of sequels of this film. It absolutely could be coming to a close, and I certainly hope that that's the case. I hope you enjoyed this video. We'll talk to you again real soon.